Now, the BBC News at 10 with Fiona Bruce.
Tonight at 10, Nigel Farage suddenly announces he'll stand as a candidate in the general election for his party, Reform UK. He'd publicly insisted over and over that he had no intention of standing, until today.
I've changed my mind. It's allowed, you know.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer were on the campaign trail, setting out their policies. We'll bring you more on today's election developments. Also tonight, a British-Israeli man is confirmed dead, along with 3 other hostages in Gaza, as the latest proposed peace plan is yet to be agreed. 500,000 families lose out on their child benefit thanks to a technical glitch at HMRC.
Space for Alexander-Arnold, and he's made the most of it.
On BBC London, the bereaved families asking politicians what they're going to do to tackle violence in the capital and how they'll help create opportunities for young people.
Good evening. He's insisted numerous times since the general election was called that he would not stand as a candidate. But today, he changed his mind and possibly how the election will play out. Nigel Farage says he's going to take over leading the Reform UK party and will run as a candidate for it in the seat of Clacton in Essex. He put down his sudden change of heart to the millions of people he says he doesn't want to let down. Our special correspondent Lucy Manning has all the details.
Mr Farage, are you standing?
Well, we'll find out in a moment, won't we?
Why did you change your mind?
Who knows? Who says I have?
Well, why? You said a few weeks ago, well, you said 10 days ago that you weren't going to stand, so why the change?
Did you ever change your mind? About anything ever?
He said he wouldn't, but now he will. A major U-turn, a change of heart thrusts Nigel Farage into the heart of the general election campaign.
I've changed my mind. It's allowed, you know. It's not always a sign of weakness. It could potentially be a sign of strength. So I am going to stand in this election.
Margaret Thatcher famously said she wasn't for turning. You are obviously for turning. Why the massive U-turn all of a sudden?
This is the old thing about hearts and heads, isn't it? You know, I rationally thought this was too difficult. I've changed my mind because I can't let down millions of people who would feel let down by me unless I was at the front and led this charge over the course of the next 5.5 years.
A Reform UK source says Mr Farage loves the theatre of it all, and he's certainly put himself centre stage at this election. The worry for the Conservatives is that he will divert votes away from them.
Mr Farage, who'd been called a chicken for not running, was also announced as the new Reform UK leader, unlike other parties, without any sort of vote. When the election was called, Mr Farage had said it was too soon and he was also too busy with US politics.
6 weeks is such a short period of time to fight a parliamentary constituency and promote the cause around the country. And, you know, I think Rishi Sunak has wrong-footed an awful lot of people, myself included.
Nigel Paul Farage.
He's tried 7 times before to be an MP. So will it be 8th time lucky in Clacton in Essex? The seaside town, big Brexit voters, and previously had a UKIP MP. Today's announcement making waves.
I wouldn't want him running the country, but I just funny some of the things he says and does. It's like good old British style, really.
You know, I think if you run for the Clacton, he will win it.
I don't understand why people focus so much on him when he doesn't bring anything other than division and difficulties.
The Tories say Reform UK won't win any seats, so voting for them only helps Labour, and they claim Nigel Farage is giving Keir Starmer a blank cheque. But the Reform UK leader says he will surprise everyone again, and that will worry the Conservatives. Lucy Manning, BBC News.
And here is the list of candidates we know about so far standing in the Clacton constituency. The BBC News website will have a complete list once they're all confirmed. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says if he becomes PM, he would be prepared to use nuclear weapons to defend the UK. At a campaign event in Bury, he said his party would increase defence spending and update the country's nuclear arsenal. Both the Tories and Labour are keen to make national security a prominent issue in this election, as our political editor Chris Mason reports.
The Fusilier Museum in Bury in Greater Manchester is a shrine to military service. Today, the man who wants to be Prime Minister wants to convince you the country would be safe in his hands. Look at those around him. They've each served in the forces. They are now Labour candidates.
National security is the most important issue of our times. Something which, of course, is always true, and which for us, if we're privileged to serve our country, will become our solemn responsibility.
And Labour is promising to keep the UK's nuclear weapons if it wins. Keir Starmer, you could be Prime Minister next month. If circumstances necessitated it, would you authorise the firing of nuclear weapons, yes or no?
It's a vital part of our defence, and of course that means we have to be prepared to use it.
How things have changed. I can't imagine being invited to a place like this for a speech by his predecessor Jeremy Corbyn.
I want to be here because of my belief in a nuclear-free future.
Here addressing a campaign for nuclear disarmament rally in 2016. In that same year, half a dozen members of the current shadow cabinet voted against renewing the UK's nuclear weapons. Has the Labour leopard really changed its spots on defence?
I lead this party. I've changed this party. If we're privileged to come in to serve, I will be the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And I've got my whole cabinet, shadow cabinet, behind me.
One of those opponents 8 years ago, Labour's now deputy leader. She backs the current policy but chose to mention something today her boss did not.
Globally, we should be looking at disarmament of nuclear weapons, but that has to be done in combination with other countries.
The Scottish National Party are opposed to nuclear weapons, the Liberal Democrats criticise Conservative cuts to the army, and the Tories are having a go at Labour.
You've got Starmer kind of promising everything on defence, 2.5% when conditions allow. I mean, you know, I'd love to do everything when conditions allow. It's just you can't believe a word this guy says.
So let's talk about money with the man who could be Keir Starmer's Defence Secretary in a matter of weeks. You've talked about Labour spending 2.5% of national income on defence, but you've not put a time frame on it. It's meaningless, isn't it, without a time frame?
We must increase defence spending to deal with the increasing threats we face.
But by when?
We'll undertake a defence review within the first year where we'll look at the threats we face, the capabilities we need, and we will set the plan to hit 2.5% as part of that review.
Labour look and sound very different on defence than they did. The question for you is how that might change your view of them or not. Chris Mason, BBC News in Bury.
The Conservatives have pledged to update equality laws to define a person's sex as their biological sex at birth. They say current confusion over definitions cannot be allowed to continue, and updating the law would make biological sex a protected characteristic. They claim that means it would be easier to create protected spaces for women and girls. Labour say the law doesn't need to be amended and accuse the Conservatives of stoking a culture war. Here's Alex Forsyth.
Flanked by young footballers, the Prime Minister claimed today he was tackling an issue to improve the safety of women and girls. The Conservatives want to change the Equality Act, so sex would mean biological sex. They say that would make it clearer that single-sex spaces, from public toilets to refuges, can be for biological women and girls only, not those born male, even if they've legally changed their sex on their birth certificate. The Equalities Minister claims this is necessary because there's been confusion and legal challenges over the issue.
We have, rapists being put in women's prisons and that being said to be legal. We can't just leave this and say, oh, well, we'll just put out some more guidance. We've put out the guidance. It's not working. People are going to court, endless tribunals. We need to settle this once and for all.
Labour point out there's already provision for single-sex spaces. They would issue more guidance, but claim the Tories are just trying to divert attention.
We've seen, whether it's through this or national service, I think an attempt by the Conservatives to generate some debates which are not about the economy or the NHS or law and order and criminal justice, to move away from those issues where the Conservatives have an appalling record.
Even the Lib Dems, no strangers to political stunts of their own, called this a distraction to stoke a culture war.
Where a public service needs to have further guidance, we're happy to issue that guidance. But let's not pick apart legislation that reflects the hard-fought and hard-won protections given to women, to trans women and to all sorts of people from protected characteristics.
The Conservatives have been accused of trying to stoke tensions, not least in other political parties. They say it's a point of principle. This is a complex and sensitive area that can involve balancing the rights of those involved. And it's already been proven this issue is not easy to navigate. Tensions were brought to the fore when the Scottish Government tried to change the law to make it easier for people to change their legal sex, only to be blocked by UK ministers. Now the Tories say decisions on this issue should be taken in Westminster, not something welcomed by the SNP.
It's just another example of undermining the powers of the Scottish Parliament. Now, obviously, I don't want to see that because I believe we should have a Parliament with the full range of powers to tackle all of the issues that affect the people of Scotland.
So, a policy change that's needed or an issue being used as a political football. Another point of contention in this campaign. Alex Forsyth, BBC News.
Let's go back to Chris Mason, who's in Salford for us this evening. Chris, Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer out on the campaign trail today. Which is most likely to be affected by the announcement of a candidate for a seat in Clacton this evening?
Without question, Fiona, the Conservatives, this is the kind of news that nightmares are made of for the Conservatives. Nigel Farage, the Tory tormentor-in-chief, relaxed and jocular and enjoying the idea of making the Conservative Party, a party he once belonged to, really squirm. Why? Because Conservatives, plenty of them, conclude that quite a few of their recent voters are lured by Reform UK and already were, and now fear the prospect of Nigel Farage being much more prominent will enhance the magnetism of that party. And there's another thing worth pondering tonight. It's not just that Nigel Farage is going to be a candidate, it is that he is assuming the leadership of that party, and that will give him a platform and a profile he simply wouldn't have had in his other role as an honorary president. In other words, Nigel Farage is just where he loves to be, centre stage and disrupting. And this matters not because of him, loved by some, loathed by others. It's because of his capacity to shape the mood and the outlook of one of the big actors in this campaign. In other words, the Conservative Party. How do they react to the prospect of Nigel Farage out and about with much, much greater prominence? And all of this on the eve of the first big set-piece moment of the campaign, the head-to-head prime ministerial debate between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. That is happening on television tomorrow night.
Chris in Salford, thank you. Well, the first televised leadership debate of the general election is taking place in Glasgow tonight, and there have been robust exchanges between leaders from the SNP, Scottish Conservatives, Scottish Labour and Scottish Liberal Democrats. Our Scotland editor, James Cook, has been watching.
Ready or not, here they come. The first of many election debates is underway.
Good evening and welcome to the STV Leaders Debate. The first
with Scotland's centre stage, the leaders began by pitching for votes.
If the SNP win, they'll claim every seat as a mandate for independence. They'll be distracted from the local issues you care about. So in key seats up and down Scotland, if everyone who wants to beat the SNP votes together for the Scottish Conservatives, we can end their obsession with independence for good.
Scotland can't afford 5 more years of this rotten Tory government. We can't miss this opportunity for change. So every vote for Scottish Labour is a vote to make sure we get rid of the Tories, to maximise Scotland's influence and to deliver the change Scotland needs.
We all know the Westminster system is broken. It's delivered austerity, Brexit and the cost of living crisis. Scotland deserves better.
Scottish Liberal Democrats are all about hope,
and we're part of the change that's coming. In the next Parliament, we'll be working for a better Britain to restore your faith in politics and fix our broken relationship with Europe.
The debate quickly turned to the economy and North Sea oil.
We would do a windfall tax on the oil and gas giants to make sure we're putting more money into people's pockets to lower their bills, as well as investing in the clean energy of the future so we can lower bills for good.
The danger of your position, Anas, is that that is going to lead to the loss of tens of thousands of jobs in the northeast of Scotland. Now that, I'm afraid, is a price that is not worth paying.
These parties have been bereft of ideas, they've not driven down reliance on fossil fuels, and they've not taken the steps to bring about that just transition.
You will not hear me at all tonight or at any point in this campaign downplaying the difficult circumstances that are facing people here in Scotland, across the whole of the UK, and indeed in many other parts of the world.
Tasked with creating more
Already,
jobs,
plenty of
bills,
food for thought,
delivering
and the
energy
election
security
is just
really
getting
important
going.
when you have
So, here tonight at the studios of STV in Glasgow, this debate is not over yet. Now, clearly that was just a snapshot, but even in that snapshot, we've learned a few things about this campaign, and also there's been a reminder of just how much has happened in the last few years, because the principal discussion, number one, was about the economy, the cost of living, and in that there was talk of COVID, there was talk of Brexit, there was talk of Liz Truss, there was talk of the climate crisis. So a lot that has happened over the past few years. The second theme that came up was there was a lot of discussion about policy areas that aren't actually strictly the responsibility of Westminster. They're the responsibility of the Scottish Government and the Scottish Parliament, but nonetheless some of those are determined by how much funding is allocated at Westminster. And then the third theme that I would say emerged is, guess what? The Constitution. The bubbling debate about independence in Scotland still is there under the surface. It's not going away. It won't go away for this campaign either.
James Cook, thank you. Now, you've told us that you want to be more involved in this election campaign, so we would like to hear from you in Your Voice, Your Vote. Tell us which issues really matter to you and where you want us to report from and why. Keep your suggestions coming during the campaign. You can find details of how to submit them on the BBC News app. And if you want more on the election, then Newsnight is where you can go. Here's Victoria Derbyshire.
Hi, tonight, how much damage could Nigel Farage do to both the Conservatives and Labour? Plus, there's so much chatter about the latest opinion polls. What's actually going on? Trusted polling guru Sir John Curtis is with us live. Don't miss Newsnight, BBC Two and iPlayer at 10:30.
There are mixed signals tonight from the Israeli government about whether they will agree to a US peace plan for Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel could start adopting parts of the plan, but not unless it leads to the total destruction of Hamas. Tonight it's been confirmed that 4 hostages are dead, including one British-Israeli man, Nadav Popplewell. Last week, President Biden set out a 3-part peace plan, starting with an initial 6-week ceasefire, leading to an end in the fighting, the freeing of all the hostages, and the reconstruction of Gaza without Hamas in power. Our Middle East correspondent Lucy Williamson hears from people inside Gaza and in the town of Sderot on the Israel-Gaza border to gauge reaction to the new plan.
The price of Gaza's war is rising as its cities crumble. The price of peace, too high for leaders on both sides. Israel said it had bombed more than 50 targets since yesterday. But Hamas is still fighting here, and hopes for the new ceasefire deal were mixed.
Hamas should raise its demands and seriously adhere to the conditions they set, which are the people's demands.
Hamas, accept the deal. It's enough. Enough of what we lost. We urge Hamas to stop the war.
Israel's Prime Minister is negotiating on 2 fronts. His far-right allies say he must continue the war until Hamas is destroyed or they'll bring down the government. He's insisted that his conditions for a ceasefire haven't changed.
We have gone a long way to return the hostages while keeping the war's objectives in mind, primarily the elimination of Hamas. We insist that we will achieve both. It's all part of the plan, not something I've just added.
But Hamas has said it won't free more hostages without a guarantee the war will end. Tonight, Israel learned that 4 more captives were confirmed to have died. Chaim Perry, Yoram Metzger, Amiram Cooper, and British-Israeli Nadav Popplewell.
After almost 8 months of war, much of northern Gaza lies in ruins. But Israel's Prime Minister is struggling to end the war because he hasn't achieved his war goals. He hasn't brought back all the hostages. He hasn't destroyed Hamas. The US president says Hamas is no longer capable of carrying out the kind of attack it did on the 7th of October. But Israelis living here by the Gaza border say they still don't feel safe.
This is the last time Yaren saw her neighbourhood, trapped in her home in Sderot by the Gaza border as Hamas gunmen ran through the streets.
You know, if my middle...
She and her 3 children fled to Jerusalem the next day. A ceasefire now, she says, won't be enough to send them home.
We will free the hostages, but few years from now, your life will be... You will be the next hostages. You will be the next people that get murdered, that the women that raped. This will be happen again. This ceasefire will kill us.
Ending this conflict rests with the leaders of Israel and Hamas, locked in a war for their own survival. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Sderot.
Here, around 500,000 families haven't received their child benefit payments, which were due to be put into their accounts today. HM Revenue and Customs say a technical issue meant some of today's bank transfers weren't made. But the problem has now been fixed, and those affected will be paid on Wednesday morning. Theo Leggett reports.
Czech Republic.
Like hundreds of thousands of other parents, Susan MacDonald was expecting her child benefit to be paid today. The disabled mother of 2 says she needs the money to pay for essentials like food and electricity. It didn't arrive.
We rely on that money every week. It's £42 that you get for 2 kids, and that is a lot of money to people like myself. And I can't imagine what other people must be feeling the exact same way. It's so frustrating.
Child benefit is worth £25.60 per week for the eldest child and £16.95 a week for younger children. Many families on low incomes depend on it. HMRC says a processing error meant that 3 out of 10 payments due today didn't go through. In a statement it said, "We are very sorry that some customers did not receive their scheduled child benefit payments as expected, and we understand the concern and difficulty this may have caused. We have now fixed the problem and are putting measures in place to prevent this from happening again." But those affected will still have to wait until Wednesday before getting their money.
I don't even know what I'm going to do. That's really stressful. I'm going to have to maybe speak to a friend to borrow money for gas and electric. I have no idea.
HMRC says if people have been left out of pocket, for example if they've been fined for late payments, they may be able to obtain compensation by making a complaint online. And it's promised that people who are due to get child benefit tomorrow will be paid without a hitch. Theo Leggett, BBC News.
Joe Biden's son Hunter has gone on trial today on gun charges. The first prosecution in US history for the child of a sitting president. The 54-year-old denies 3 criminal charges stemming from his purchase of a handgun in 2018. The prosecution claim he was heavily addicted to drugs at the time. Well, Tom Bateman is outside the courthouse in Wilmington, Delaware for us this evening. And Tom, this trial for Hunter Biden is serious enough, but it couldn't come at a worse time for his father.
That's right, 5 months before a presidential election, and a trial here due to put in a very public glare the personal life and allegations of serial drug abuse of the son of the United States president. Now, Hunter Biden arrived here first thing this morning with members of the Biden family, among them his stepmother, the First Lady Jill Biden, who sat in court all day, just around a metre or so away from Hunter Biden in the public seats just behind him. I was in the press gallery and saw him glance back to her as the proceedings began. Now, they have selected a jury today, all of this dates back to the purchase in 2018 of a handgun here in Wilmington by Hunter Biden. The prosecution alleged that he lied on a form, the application form, by not declaring that he was a drug user at the time. The defence will argue that he couldn't knowingly have described himself as a drug addict at that moment, but it is some of the political overtones that will also dominate the coverage here in the US as Republicans have tried to link scandal around Hunter Biden unsuccessfully to Joe Biden. He says he won't comment on a legal case, but as a father, he's standing by his son.
Tom in Wilmington, thank you. There have been scenes of jubilation in Mexico City's Zocalo Square as thousands of people celebrate the election of Mexico's first female president. Claudia Sheinbaum won about 60% of the vote in Sunday's election. She's an environmental scientist turned politician and considered a protege of the previous president. She insists, though, her predecessor will wield no influence over her government. Will Grant reports.
It's a new day in Mexican politics. After 2 centuries of men in power, when voters eventually chose their first female president, it was with a landslide. The victory itself was a moment to savour for Claudia Sheinbaum, and she was quick to acknowledge the many women who'd blazed a trail before her.
No llego sola.
I didn't get here on my own, we got here together, she said, thanks to our ancestors, our mothers, our daughters and granddaughters.
In a nation of such entrenched machismo, what Claudia Sheinbaum has achieved here is no small feat. Other women have tried and failed, but her offer of continuity with the governing party's social policies, which have pulled millions from poverty, have proved hugely popular with the electorate.
This election has been historic for all the wrong reasons too. It's been Mexico's most violent campaign in living memory, with dozens of candidates murdered as they sought votes. In the city of Celaya, a mayoral candidate with Miss Sheinbaum's own party was gunned down in the street, a murder a sign of the task ahead for the president-elect, one which her critics say she isn't up to. Rather, they say she'll be a puppet of her authoritarian mentor, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Speaking to the BBC during the campaign, she denied that accusation.
Of course I'm of the same movement with López Obrador. We fought together for 20 years or more than 20 years to have the government that we have now, and the opportunity for Mexican people and the right for Mexican people, the rights. And of course I'm going to live a different time in history.
Mexico may have turned a corner with Claudia Sheinbaum's win, but it is still a nation where women are treated as inferior, where 11 women and girls are murdered every single day. To curtail that violence, she must now succeed where so many men before her have failed. Will Grant, BBC News, Mexico City.
Football now, and in the warm-up matches for next month's Euros tournament, Scotland and England have both been in action. Andy Swiss reports.
For England fans of every generation, you could hear the excitement. Step forward Cole Palmer to fire them in front.
The king of the spot kicks.
The young Chelsea star showing his. Arnold extended their lead before Harry Kane rounded things off. Victory then for the fans here to celebrate, but plenty to work on. England will be hoping for a more fluent performance when they face Iceland in their final warm-up game on Friday. Scotland continue their preparations against Gibraltar, world ranking 203. Sounds easy? Well, think again.
Scotland do get the breakthrough.
And with the deadlock finally broken for Scotland.
Now, with poignant timing, the day after the death of the Leeds Rhino player Rob Burrow from motor neurone disease, work began to build a centre in his name for MND sufferers. He raised funds for it and also helped in its design. The 41-year-old left this last message to be broadcast after his death.
By the time that you watch this, I will no longer be here. I hope I have left a mark on the disease. I hope it shows to live in the moment. I hope you find inspiration from the whole story. My final message to you is whatever your personal battle, be brave and face it. Every single day is precious. Don't waste a moment. In a world full of adversity, we must still dare to dream. Rob Burrow over and out.
A remarkable man and a very brave one. The last public words of Rob Burrow, who died yesterday. Right, let's take a look at the weather now. Stav is here. Stav, I can't be the only one who's wondering, when is it going to get warmer?
You mean as warm like the spring we had? That did include very mild frost-free nights, though. That's why it was above average. But talking frost, good evening to you. Looks like we could even see a touch of frost in sheltered rural spots as we move through this week, would you believe, the first proper week of meteorological summer. It is turning cooler and Arctic air mass is moving southwards. That's going to bring sunshine and showers. The culprit, this area of low pressure moving south out of Greenland and Iceland, pushing weather fronts southwards during the course of Tuesday. And behind it, although skies will clear with some sunshine, it's going to be much cooler, particularly across the northern half of the country. Temperatures recovering a little bit in the south, but it will stay cool for the time of year, and nights are going to be chilly. Tonight, though, is another fairly mild one. We've got quite a bit of cloud around, some spits and spots of rain over northern and western hills. We'll start to see these weather fronts ganging up on the northwest corner, so it'll turn wet and windy here by the end of the night, but you'll see those temperatures 10 to 14 degrees, another pretty mild night, much like May was, which is why it was so warm. Now, as we head through Tuesday, we start off with a bit of sunshine, some cloud across England and Wales. This band of rain and cloud, some of it heavy and squally, will spread southwards through the day. Ahead of it, could see a few heavy showers in East Anglia, but skies brighten up nicely behind it. Lots of sunshine, but a whole rash of showers pushing in to Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some of them will be heavy. There may be some hail, maybe some rumbles of thunder, turning chillier here. Last of the warm air there, 20 degrees in the southeast. Wednesday, we're all into the cooler air mass. Plenty of sunshine around. Showers will develop pretty much anywhere, but most of them across the northern half of the country. Again, some of them frequent, heavy. There could be some hail, some thunder mixed in too. Quite windy. Temperatures 10 to 13 degrees. Factor in the wind. Feel cold than that. Only 15 to 17 degrees in the southeast. So pretty disappointing temperatures for early June. It stays the same for the end of the week into the weekend. Could start to warm up, though, across the south in that strong June sunshine. Perhaps up to 20 degrees, but generally cool. Watch out for those cold nights.
Stav, thanks very much. Well, that is the BBC News at 10. On BBC One, it's time to join our colleagues for the news where you are. Bye-bye.
Welcome to BBC London.